The great hall of the Galactic Council shook with sounds of celebration. Alien voices roared, chittered, and hummed in triumph as hundreds of different species watched the screen showing Earth's final moments. The blue planet burned beneath a rain of plasma fire from the Zephyrian war fleet. Cities that had stood for thousands of years crumbled into ash. Oceans boiled away into steam clouds that rose toward the dying sky. Council Prime Yathkar stood tall on his platform, his four massive arms raised high above his scaled head. His yellow eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he watched humanity's last transmission cut to static. The final human voice had been desperate, pleading for mercy that would never come. Now there was only silence from the world that had dared to challenge the galaxy's order. Today marks the end of the human threat, Yathkar announced, his voice booming through the chamber's speakers. For 3 cycles, this dangerous species spread like a plague across our peaceful galaxy. They refused our generous offers to join the council. They rejected our wisdom and our laws. They turned every world they touched into a fortress, preparing for war against their betters. The assembled aliens cheered louder. The crystalline Vorthan delegates rang like glass bells struck by hammers. The gas cloud Nexari pulsed with bright flashes of lightning. The machine hybrid architects buzzed with electronic satisfaction. Even the peaceful Elderkin, who rarely showed emotion, clicked their mandibles in approval. Admiral Kresh of the Zephyrian fleet appeared on the main screen, his reptilian face proud and fierce. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship was filled with celebrating soldiers. Council Prime, I am pleased to report total success. Every human city has been reduced to ash. Every military base has been destroyed. Every ship in their pathetic fleet has been turned to scrap metal floating in space. And the humans themselves? Asked Counselor Vexhai, her tentacles writhing with curiosity. Gone, Admiral Kresh replied with a sharp-toothed smile. All of them. We detected no escape pods, no evacuation ships, no underground bunkers. The planet held approximately 8 billion humans when we began the bombardment. Now it holds none. They have been wiped from existence, as you commanded. The celebration grew even louder. Delegates pounded their appendages against their seats, creating a thunderous rhythm. Some species released pheromones of joy that filled the air with sweet scents. Others projected holograms of victory symbols above their heads. Yathkar allowed the noise to continue for several minutes before raising one massive hand for silence. Let this be a lesson to any other species that might think to follow humanity's path, he declared. The Council has maintained peace and order in this galaxy for 10,000 years. We have guided lesser species to enlightenment. We have prevented wars and brought stability to countless worlds. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. But when a species refuses our guidance, when they spread chaos and defiance wherever they go, when they threaten the very foundations of our civilization, we will not hesitate to act. The humans chose their fate when they rejected our authority. They chose it when they armed their colonies and prepared for conflict. They chose it when they dared to think they could match powers that ruled the stars before their ancestors had even learned to use fire. More cheers erupted from the crowd. Some delegates had already begun discussing how to divide the former human territories. The industrial worlds would provide valuable resources. The agricultural planets could feed growing populations. The research stations might contain useful technologies. Though everyone agreed human science was primitive compared to council knowledge, the Vorthan crystalline matrix calculates significant profit from human mining operations, announced Speaker Zalaneth, her crystal body reflecting the chamber's lights in rainbow patterns. Their extraction methods were crude but effective. We can improve efficiency by 400% with proper oversight. The Nexari Collective desires their agricultural worlds, added Swarm Voice Meltar, speaking through a cloud of glowing gas. Human food production techniques show potential for modification. We can feed twice as many beings with proper application of our biotechnology. Even the normally quiet Elderkin had opinions. Elder Mother Sithora clicked softly before speaking in her ancient, measured voice. The humans built many libraries and data centers. Their primitive literature and historical records may provide entertainment value for younger species seeking simple stories. Yathkar nodded approvingly at each suggestion. This was how the galaxy should work. The Council's wisdom guiding the use of resources. Order replacing chaos. Peace maintained through strength and proper authority. Admiral Kresh's image flickered back to the main screen. Council Prime, my fleet stands ready to begin occupation of the former human territories. We have prepared administration teams to take control of their facilities and begin proper exploitation of their resources. Excellent, Admiral. Begin immediately. I want Council flags flying over every former human world within the next cycle. Show the galaxy that we waste no time in bringing order to places where chaos once ruled. As the session continued, delegates shared stories of human arrogance and defiance. They recalled how human ambassadors had walked out of council meetings when offered the chance to become client species. They remembered human colonies that had refused to pay proper tribute taxes. They spoke of human military exercises that seemed designed to threaten council shipping lanes. They thought their rapid expansion made them powerful, laughed Councillor Vexai. In less than 500 years, they spread to over 200 worlds. They believed this made them our equals. Their technology was advancing too quickly, added Speaker Zalaneth. Our projections showed they would develop dangerous capabilities within another 200 years if left unchecked. They were learning to think like conquerors rather than servants. Swarm Voice Meltar agreed. This was unacceptable. As the celebration finally began to wind down, Yathkar stood once more to address the assembly. Today we have preserved the galaxy's peace for countless generations to come. Our children and our children's children will live in a safer universe because of our decisive action. The human infection has been cleansed from reality itself. The chamber erupted in one final round of cheers as delegates began to file out, already planning their new acquisitions. None of them noticed the small anomaly reported by deep space sensors at the galaxy's edge. None of them paid attention to the slight gravitational disturbances detected near the void between spiral arms in their triumph. They had forgotten to ask a simple question. If the humans had truly been wiped out, where were the bodies? The celebration was perfect. The victory was complete. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, something vast and patient had just finished the first phase of a plan that had been decades in the making. 3 days after the celebration, Admiral Kresh stood on the bridge of his flagship with his confidence cracking like old armor. The reports coming in from his occupation forces made no sense. Every single human colony they had reached was empty. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Simply abandoned. Admiral, called Lieutenant Veltar from the communications station, her voice tight with confusion. The 7th Fleet has just reported from the Kepler 442 system. Same situation as all the others. The mining stations are intact, but there are no humans anywhere. Kresh's claws dug into the metal railing in front of him. Kepler 442 had been one of humanity's largest industrial centers. Over 50 million humans had lived and worked there, according to Council intelligence. The system's asteroid belt had been filled with mining platforms and processing facilities. There should have been bodies. There should have been evidence of panic, of evacuation attempts, of something. What about their ships? Kresh growled. Their transportation? Their evacuation craft? That's the strange part, sir. All their ships are still there. Cargo vessels, personal transports, even their small fighter craft. Everything is docked exactly where our reconnaissance showed it should be. But the ships are empty too. No humans anywhere. The same reports had been coming in all day. New Terra colony. Population 12 million, all gone. Proxima Station. Population 800,000, all gone. Even tiny research outposts with just a few dozen humans had the same result. People simply vanished, but everything else remained untouched. Crash activated his private communication link to Council Prime Yathkar. The massive alien's face appeared on the screen, and for the first time since the Admiral had known him, Yathkar looked uncertain. "Admiral, I trust you have an explanation for these reports," Yathkar said. But his usual commanding tone was missing. "I wish I did. Council Prime, my troops have searched 17 human colonies so far. In every single case, we find the same thing. Complete infrastructure. Complete equipment. Zero humans. It's as if they all just walked away and forgot to tell anyone where they were going." Yathkar's forearms moved restlessly. Perhaps they had advance warning of our attack. Perhaps they evacuated before our fleets arrived. "Impossible, sir. Our intelligence networks would have detected mass evacuations. We monitored their communications for cycles before the attack. There was no indication they knew what was coming. Besides, where would they go? We accounted for every human ship in their fleet. Their technology didn't allow for faster-than-light evacuation of entire populations." The Council Prime's yellow eyes narrowed. "Then explain to me how billions of humans simply disappeared, Admiral." Crash had no answer. He had been asking himself the same question for 3 days. In his long military career, he had conquered dozens of worlds. Sometimes populations fled before his arrival. Sometimes they fought to the death. Sometimes they surrendered and begged for mercy. But he had never seen anything like this. "Sir," Lieutenant Veltar interrupted again. "Priority message from the council chambers. They're requesting immediate updates on the human body count." Both Crash and Yathkar fell silent. The body count was supposed to be simple mathematics. 8 billion humans on Earth, plus roughly 6 billion more spread across their colonies. 14 billion bodies to process and dispose of. Instead, they had 0. "Admiral," Yathkar said slowly, "I want you to personally investigate one of these empty colonies. Take your best scientists and researchers. Find out what happened to these humans." Crash selected the closest abandoned colony, an agricultural world called New Haven, according to their files. It had housed nearly 2 million humans who grew food for export to other human worlds. As his shuttle descended through the planet's atmosphere, he could see vast farms stretching to the horizon. Crops grew in perfect rows. Automated irrigation systems still functioned. Nothing looked damaged or disturbed. The main colony city appeared normal from above. Buildings stood intact. Vehicles sat parked in orderly lines. Streetlights operated on their regular schedules. But as the shuttle landed in the central plaza, the silence hit them like a physical weight. Crash's exploration team spread out through the city, checking homes, offices, and public buildings. The scene was the same everywhere. Meals sat half-eaten on tables. Computers displayed work that had been abandoned mid-sentence. Children's toys lay scattered in playgrounds. Personal belongings remained in homes as if their owners had just stepped out for a moment. "Admiral, you need to see this," called Dr. Zithran, the expedition's chief scientist. She had been examining the colony's main administrative building. Crash found her in what appeared to be a conference room. A large table was surrounded by chairs, with documents and data tablets scattered across its surface. Coffee cups sat at several positions, still containing cold liquid. "Look at these documents," Dr. Zithran said, pointing to papers spread across the table. "These are colony supply reports, food production schedules, mining quotas, Everything looks completely normal. This meeting appears to have been interrupted right in the middle of routine business. When? Kresh asked. Dr. Zithran checked her scanner. Based on the age of the organic materials and the decay rate of the coffee, I estimate this meeting ended approximately 72 hours ago. Kresh felt a chill run down his spine. 72 hours ago was exactly when the bombardment of Earth had begun. At the precise moment, his fleet had started destroying the human homeworld. Humans throughout the galaxy had simply stopped whatever they were doing and vanished. But that was impossible. Communication between Earth and its colonies took hours or days, even with their fastest ships. There was no way for Earth to send evacuation orders to distant worlds quickly enough for this kind of coordinated disappearance. Doctor, is there any evidence of transportation? Any sign of how they left? None. The colony's spaceport shows no unusual activity. No ships launched around the time of the disappearance. The transport logs are completely normal up until the exact moment everyone vanished. Kresh spent the next several hours examining other areas of the colony. The power plant still ran automatically, keeping lights and climate control functioning. The water treatment facility continued processing and distributing clean water. Even the garbage collection robots continued their scheduled routes, though they found no new waste to collect. In the colony's main communication center, they found the most disturbing discovery yet. The last message in the system had been sent to Earth just hours before the bombardment began. It was a routine status report about crop yields and weather patterns. Nothing urgent. Nothing that suggested the sender knew death was coming for their species. But the timestamp on the message showed it had never been completed. The transmission had cut off mid-sentence at the exact moment the attack on Earth began. As if whoever was typing, it had simply stopped existing. As darkness fell over the empty city, Kresh gathered his team back at the shuttle. The colony's streetlights came on automatically, illuminating empty sidewalks and vacant buildings. In the distance, automated farm equipment continued its work, tending crops that no one would ever harvest. Admiral, Dr. Zithran said quietly, I've run every test I can think of. There's no evidence of weapons, no sign of violence, no indication of disease or poison. These people didn't die here. They just weren't here anymore. Kresh looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere among those lights were dozens of other empty human colonies, all with the same impossible story. Billions of people had simply ceased to exist at the exact moment their homeworld died. As his shuttle lifted off from New Haven, leaving the empty city to its automatic systems and abandoned dreams. Kresh realized that their victory celebration might have been premature. You can't kill something that isn't there to begin with. And if the humans weren't dead, then where in the galaxy had they gone? The first strange report came from Monitoring Station Delta 7, a remote outpost on the edge of Orthan space. Commander Felinai had been tracking deep space traffic for over 20 years, and she had never seen readings like these. Show me the data again, she told her assistant, her crystalline body flickering with patterns of confusion. The holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of local space with normal traffic routes marked in blue. But scattered throughout the map were dozens of red warning markers indicating gravitational anomalies that appeared and disappeared without explanation. The distortions last exactly 17 seconds each time, her assistant explained. They show up on our sensors as massive objects, sometimes as large as small moons. But when we focus our instruments on those coordinates, there's nothing there. Empty space. Felinai studied the pattern. The anomalies weren't random. They appeared along specific routes, almost like someone was testing different paths through space. But testing for what? Have you reported this to Vorthen High Command? Yes, Commander. They told us our equipment must be malfunctioning. They said gravitational signatures that large can't just appear and disappear. But Felini's equipment wasn't malfunctioning. She had personally calibrated every sensor array on the station just 2 weeks ago. If her instruments detected something, then something was there, even if it couldn't be seen. Similar reports began coming in from monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. The Nexari Collective reported whispers in the quantum foam, impossible communications that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Architect listening posts detected data transmissions using encryption methods that shouldn't exist. Even the peaceful Elderkin reported that their long-range sensors were picking up energy signatures that matched no known technology. But the most disturbing reports came from the Zephyrian patrol fleets. Ships that ventured too close to former human territories were experiencing equipment failures, communication blackouts, and, in some cases, total loss of contact. Admiral Kresh read the latest report with growing unease. The destroyer Talon's Edge had been investigating the former human research station at Volf 359 when it suddenly stopped responding to radio calls. Search and rescue ships found the vessel intact and undamaged, floating dead in space. The entire crew was unconscious but unharmed, with no memory of what had happened to them. They were out for exactly 17 seconds, the medical report stated. All crew members show the same gap in their memories. Brain scans reveal no damage or external interference. They simply stopped existing for a brief period, then returned to consciousness with no knowledge of the gap. 17 seconds. The same duration as the gravitational anomalies. The same length of time that surveillance systems across the galaxy had been experiencing mysterious blackouts. During these blackouts, things began to disappear. Supply depots throughout Council space reported missing equipment, always the same types of items. Quantum processors vanished from research facilities. Dark matter containment units disappeared from energy plants. Vast quantities of rare metals were stolen from mining stations. The thefts were surgical and precise, with no sign of forced entry or damage to surrounding equipment. Security recordings showed the same pattern everywhere. Cameras would function normally, then display static for exactly 17 seconds, then return to normal operation. During those 17 seconds, valuable equipment would simply vanish. Counselor Vex High called an emergency session to address the growing concerns. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the council chambers. Their earlier celebration replaced by nervous tension. "We are dealing with technological theft on an unprecedented scale," she announced, her tentacles writhing with agitation. In the past week alone, over 300 facilities have reported missing equipment. The stolen items follow a specific pattern that suggests coordinated planning. Speaker Zalanath's crystal body rang with worried harmonics. The Vorthan Matrix has analyzed the theft pattern. The missing items, when combined, would provide the components needed to build advanced dimensional manipulation technology. A collective gasp went through the chamber. Dimensional manipulation was theoretical at best. Even the most advanced council species had only begun to understand the basic principles involved. "Who could possess such knowledge?" demanded Swarm Voice Meltar. "What species in this galaxy has the ability to manipulate space-time itself?" The chamber fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Only one species had shown rapid technological advancement in recent centuries. Only one species had demonstrated an unusual ability to adapt and innovate beyond their apparent limitations. "The humans are dead," Yathkar stated firmly, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "We watched their homeworld burn. We confirmed the destruction of their fleet. They cannot be responsible for these thefts." But even as he spoke, new reports were arriving. A Nexari exploration ship had detected massive construction activity in the void between galaxies. in the empty space where no stars shone and no planets orbited. Long-range sensors picked up energy signatures that suggested industrial operations on a scale that dwarfed anything in Council Space. Dr. Vithara of the Architect Collective stood to address the assembly. My people have been analyzing the energy patterns detected in the void. The readings are consistent with massive space construction projects, but the technology involved is beyond our current understanding. Whatever is being built out there is using power sources that we cannot identify. How massive? Yathkar asked. Conservative estimates suggest structures with internal volumes larger than most moons. The energy requirements alone would need the output of several stars to maintain. The chamber erupted in worried murmurs. Several delegates demanded immediate investigation fleets be sent to the void. Others argued that whatever was happening was too dangerous to approach directly. But Elder Mother Sithara of the Elderkin rose slowly from her seat, her ancient voice carrying across the chamber. My people have long memories, she said, her words creating silence among the other delegates. We remember stories from the early days of galactic civilization, tales of species that learned to walk between the spaces when threatened with extinction. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. These were not just myths or legends. They were warnings. When a species faces total destruction, when they have nothing left to lose, some have been known to abandon normal space entirely. They retreat to the void, to the spaces between reality, where they can build without interference. You're suggesting the humans somehow escaped to another dimension? Counselor Vex High asked, her voice filled with disbelief. I'm suggesting that we may have made the same mistake that other galactic powers made in the distant past. We assumed that destroying a species' homeworld meant destroying the species itself. We never considered that some beings are clever enough to prepare for such an eventuality. As if summoned by her words, every communication device in the chamber suddenly activated. Static filled the air for exactly 17 seconds, then cleared to reveal a simple message transmitted on all frequencies simultaneously. We offered you partnership. You chose extermination. We offered you our discoveries. You chose fear. We offered you growth. You chose stagnation. We have learned much in the time since your fleets burned our homeworld. Soon, we will return to share that knowledge with you. The message ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. On every screen in the room, star charts appeared showing the locations of the mysterious gravitational anomalies. But now they could see the pattern clearly. The anomalies formed a vast network stretching across the galaxy, connecting every major world and strategic position. Someone had been mapping the galaxy in detail. Someone had been studying council defenses, supply lines, and communication networks. Someone had been preparing as emergency alerts began sounding throughout the chamber, reporting massive energy spikes detected at the edge of explored space. Yathkar realized that their victory celebration had been premature. The humans weren't dead. They had simply been learning. And whatever they had learned in the void between worlds was about to change everything. The signs had been there all along. The galaxy had chosen not to see them. Now, as reality itself began to ripple at the edges of known space, it was too late to pretend that humanity's story had ended with the burning of Earth. It had only just begun. The damaged architect probe drifted through space like a broken bird, its metal hull scarred and twisted from whatever it had encountered in the void. Recovery teams had found it at the edge of council space, barely functional and transmitting a desperate distress signal. But the data stored in its quantum memory cores would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity. Dr. Kethful of the Architect Collective worked feverishly to extract the probe's final recordings. His mechanical limbs moved with precise efficiency as he connected interface cables to the damaged systems. Around him, The laboratory hummed with tension as council representatives waited to learn what had happened to their deep space exploration mission. The probe was damaged by massive gravitational shears. Dr. Kethval reported, his electronic voice crackling with static. Whatever it encountered generated space-time distortions powerful enough to nearly tear it apart. Admiral Kresh leaned forward, his reptilian eyes fixed on the scientist. "Show us what it found." The main display screen flickered to life, showing the probe's final images from its journey into the galactic void. At first, there was only darkness, the empty space between spiral arms where no stars burned and no planets orbited. But as the probe's instruments penetrated deeper into the void, something impossible began to appear. A structure, vast beyond comprehension, built from materials that seemed to absorb light itself. The probe's sensors detected dimensions that hurt to contemplate, internal spaces that appeared larger than the structure's external boundaries. Massive sections rotated slowly around central axes, generating artificial gravity through movement that defied known physics. "By all the ancient circuits," Dr. Kethval whispered, his mechanical voice filled with awe. "The internal volume readings are impossible. This structure appears to contain more space inside than should physically exist." But that wasn't the most shocking discovery. As the probe's camera zoomed in on different sections of the megastructure, they revealed sleek vessels docked at enormous bays. Ships built with the angular, efficient design philosophy that humanity had always favored, but scaled up to sizes that dwarfed anything humans had ever constructed before. "Those are human ships," Admiral Kresh growled, his claws digging into the metal table in front of him. "But they're 20 times larger than anything in our intelligence files." The probe's final images showed manufacturing facilities that stretched beyond the horizon, powered by energy sources that the sensors couldn't identify. Massive foundries shaped metals using processes that seemed to manipulate matter at the atomic level. Assembly lines worked with materials that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating technologies that shouldn't have been possible. And everywhere throughout the structure, the probe detected life signs. Not just thousands or millions, but billions upon billions of humans, working with purpose and coordination that spoke of careful planning and preparation. "How long would it take to build something like this?" Counselor Vex High asked, her tentacles trembling with fear. Dr. Kethval ran calculations through his quantum processors. With known construction methods and materials, a structure of this size would require several thousand years to complete. But the energy signatures suggest technologies far beyond our current understanding. They could have built this much faster using methods we can't comprehend. Speaker Zalaneth's crystalline body reflected the display's light in fractured rainbows. The Vorthan Matrix has been analyzing historical data from human colonies. We have discovered disturbing patterns in their expansion. A new display appeared, showing a map of human territorial expansion over the past 500 years. To most observers, it had looked like random growth, humans settling whatever worlds they could reach. But when connected by lines showing resource flows and communication patterns, a different picture emerged. They weren't expanding randomly, Speaker Zalaneth continued. Every human colony was positioned to provide specific resources or strategic advantages. Mining worlds supplied rare metals. Agricultural worlds provided food for massive populations. Research stations mapped gravity fields and dimensional anomalies. The map shifted, showing resource flows from human colonies converging on specific points in space, then disappearing toward the galactic void. For decades, humans had been quietly shipping materials, equipment, and people toward the empty regions between spiral arms. They were building this structure for centuries, Admiral Kresh realized, his voice filled with growing dread. Their entire expansion into our galaxy was just a cover story. They were gathering resources for something we couldn't imagine. Elder Mother Sithara spoke from her position among the Elderkin delegation, her ancient voice carrying the weight of eons. My people's archives contain fragments of similar events from the distant past. Species that appeared primitive and harmless, then revealed capabilities that transformed the galaxy. But the records are incomplete, corrupted by time. We never learned what happened to those ancient civilizations. Dr. Kethvile continued analyzing the probe's data, his mechanical systems processing information at superhuman speeds. There's more. The probe detected massive shipyards throughout the structure. Construction bays capable of building vessels larger than our capital ships. And they're not empty. The energy signatures suggest active production on an industrial scale that exceeds the combined manufacturing capacity of the entire council. The implications hit the assembled representatives like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just survived their attempted extinction. They had used it as an opportunity to abandon the limitations of normal space and build something that made council technology look primitive in comparison. How many ships? Yathkar demanded, his forearms clenched into fists. Conservative estimates suggest thousands of vessels, ranging from destroyer class to dreadnoughts larger than our battle stations. But the technology involved appears to be generations ahead of anything in council databases. On the screen, the probe's final images showed one of the human vessels powering up for departure. Energy cascaded along its hull in patterns that seemed to bend space around it. As the ship moved, reality rippled like water disturbed by a falling stone. They're not using conventional faster-than-light travel, Dr. Kethville observed. The energy patterns suggest they've learned to manipulate space-time itself, creating dimensional shortcuts that bypass normal physical limitations. The probe's recording ended with a brilliant flash of energy as something had detected its presence and destroyed it with weapons that operated on principles council science couldn't understand. But it had transmitted enough data to reveal the scope of humanity's preparations. Swarm voice. Maltar spoke for the Nexari collective, his gaseous form pulsing with patterns of fear. The collective mind has reached consensus. We underestimated this species completely. Their apparent technological limitations were deliberate deception. They allowed us to see only what they wanted us to see, while preparing for possibilities we never considered. Admiral Kresh activated his communication link to the Zephyrian High Command. I need every available ship recalled to home system immediately. If the humans are preparing to return from the void, we need to be ready for technologies beyond our current understanding. But even as he gave the orders, Kresh knew they might already be too late. The probe's data showed a civilization that had been planning for this moment for centuries. Every human colony, every research station, every seemingly innocent scientific expedition had been part of a massive, coordinated effort to prepare for survival and eventual return. There's something else, Dr. Kethville announced, his electronic voice heavy with implications. The probe detected communication signals throughout the structure. Massive data streams connecting all sections of the facility. But the encryption methods match no known human technology. What does that mean? Counselor Vexhai asked. It means they've been learning from someone else. Someone who taught them how to build in the void, how to manipulate space-time, how to survive the destruction of their homeworld. The humans didn't develop these capabilities on their own. The chamber fell silent as the full scope of their situation became clear. They had attempted to destroy a species that had already prepared for exactly that possibility. Worse, humanity had found teachers in the void. Ancient intelligences that had shown them how to transcend the limitations of normal space. As emergency alerts began sounding throughout the council chambers. REPORTI NG massive energy buildups detected at the edge of explored space. Everyone realized the same terrible truth. The humans were coming home. And they were bringing friends. The void was no longer empty. It had become humanity's forge. And they had spent centuries learning to work with fires that could reshape reality itself. The Council's victory. Celebration was about to become a wake for galactic civilization as they had known it. The Council's emergency session was interrupted by alarms that had never been designed to sound. Every sensor station in the galaxy screamed warnings simultaneously as space itself began to tear open, above a dozen different worlds. Reality rippled like water disturbed by stones thrown by gods. And through the dimensional rifts came ships that redefined what the galaxy thought possible. The human fleet that emerged didn't travel through hyperspace, or any known method of faster-than-light movement. They simply stepped out of somewhere else entirely, their vessels materializing as if they had always existed but had chosen this moment to become visible. The ships themselves were unlike anything humanity had built before, their hulls seeming to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Surfaces that reflected light that wasn't there and cast shadows in directions that had no meaning. Admiral Kresh stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his sensor displays with growing horror as the readings climbed beyond anything his instruments were designed to measure. The lead human vessel was the size of a small moon, its hull crackling with energies that made his ship's reactors look like candle flames. Behind it came dozens of others, each one larger than the Council's most powerful dreadnoughts. Admiral, his communications officer, called out, her voice tight with fear. We're receiving a transmission. It's coming from everywhere at once. Every communication device in the fleet is picking up the same signal. Put it through, Kresh ordered. Though he dreaded what he was about to hear, the voice that filled his bridge was unmistakably human, but there was something else in it now. A depth that spoke of knowledge gained in places where normal minds couldn't survive. A patience that came from existing outside the flow of normal time. An authority that had been earned through trials that most species couldn't imagine. People of the Galactic Council, the voice said. And every being in Council space heard it speaking in their own language. Perfectly translated not just in words, but in concepts and emotions. We are humanity. We have returned. On every screen throughout the galaxy, the same image appeared. A human figure, but changed by whatever they had experienced in the void. Their eyes held depths that seemed to contain galaxies, and when they moved, space around them bent subtly in response to their presence. You believed you had eliminated us, the human continued, and their words carried the weight of absolute certainty. You watched our homeworld burn and celebrated the end of what you called the human problem. You divided our former territories among yourselves and spoke of the peace you had preserved. The figure paused, and in that silence, every being in the galaxy felt a chill that went beyond temperature. It was the cold of empty space, of the void between stars where normal life could not exist. But you made a fundamental error in your calculations. You assumed that destroying our home meant destroying our people. You never considered that we might have prepared for exactly this possibility. New images appeared on the screens throughout the galaxy. The massive structure in the void, revealed in its full glory. Industrial complexes that stretched beyond horizons. Shipyards that built vessels using technologies that turned matter into whatever forms were needed. Cities where billions of humans lived and worked, not just surviving but thriving in conditions that should have been impossible. For 300 years, we prepared, the human voice continued. Every colony we established, every trade route we opened, every scientific expedition we launched was part of a larger plan. We studied your histories. We learned from species that had faced extinction before us. And we found teachers in the void, ancient intelligences that showed us how to transcend the limitations you tried to impose on us. In the council chambers, Yathkar's forearms trembled as he watched the display. The scale of humanity's deception was beyond anything he had imagined. Their entire presence in the galaxy had been a careful performance, designed to hide preparations that spanned centuries. "You offered us client species status," the human said. And now their voice carried traces of something that might have been amusement. "You wanted us to accept limits on our population, restrictions on our technology, oversight of our research. You couldn't understand why we refused such generous terms." The image shifted to show human scientists working alongside beings that seemed to be made of crystallized space itself. Entities that existed in dimensions the Council had only theorized about. The humans were learning technologies that transformed understanding itself. "We refused because we knew what you really feared. Not our expansion, not our independence, but our potential. You saw what we could become and decided to end us before we could threaten your stagnant order." Admiral Kresh watched as his sensors detected more rifts opening throughout the galaxy. Human ships appeared above every Council world, not threatening but simply present, like mountains that had always existed but were only now being noticed. Their weapons weren't powered, their shields weren't raised, but their very existence was threat enough. "You succeeded in destroying our homeworld," the human continued. "Earth is ash and radioactive dust. 8 billion people died in the fires you created. Their names are written in quantum storage that will last until the heat death of the universe. We will not forget them." The temperature in the Council chambers seemed to drop, as the human's words took on edges sharp, enough to cut reality itself. "But those 8 billion deaths accomplished something you never intended. They freed us from attachment to normal space. They removed the last constraints that kept us bound to the galaxy's rules. They transformed us from refugees seeking acceptance into something far more dangerous." The display changed again, showing the human fleet as it truly was. Thousands of vessels powered by energies drawn from dimensional spaces that existed between the atoms of normal matter. Weapons that could unmake planets by convincing their matter to simply stop existing. Shields that redirected attacks into alternate realities where they could harm nothing. "We are no longer the desperate species that begged for your acceptance," the human said. And their voice now carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond hearing. "We are no longer limited by the technologies you considered adequate for lesser beings. We have learned to work with forces that shape the universe itself." Counselor Vexhai tried to speak, to offer some form of negotiation or surrender, but found that her voice made no sound. Every communication device in the galaxy was locked to receive only, turning the entire Council space into a classroom with billions of unwilling students. "You wanted to teach us about galactic order," the human continued. "About knowing our place in the hierarchy you had established. About accepting the wisdom of our betters. Today, we begin your education in return." The human ships began to demonstrate their capabilities with casual displays that redefined impossible. A vessel no larger than a Council destroyer reached out with beams of twisted space-time and gently moved a moon from one orbit to another, just to show it could be done. Another ship created a temporary star in empty space, burning with fires that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, then extinguished it with a thought. "We could destroy your worlds as easily as you destroyed ours," the human said. And for a moment, their voice carried echoes of the billions who had died in Earth's burning. "We could reduce your civilizations to ash and scatter your fleets like dust in stellar winds. The technologies we command make your weapons look like sharpened sticks wielded by children." Fear filled the galaxy like a physical presence as every being realized they were witnessing power beyond their comprehension being held in check only by the choice of those who wielded it. "But we won't," the human continued, and their words carried a weight that promised both mercy and terrible consequences. because that would make us like you. And we have learned to be something better. The image on the screens shifted to show the inside of the human structure, where beings of dozens of species worked alongside humans in harmony that the Council had never achieved. Former enemies collaborating on projects that benefited all. Technologies shared freely among peoples who had learned to see beyond the limitations of traditional thinking. Instead, we offer you the same choice you once offered us, the humans said. Accept our guidance. Learn from our discoveries. Abandon your stagnant hierarchy in favor of growth that benefits everyone. Or continue as you are, isolated in your small corner of the galaxy, while the universe moves beyond you. The display changed one final time, showing star maps that stretched far beyond the galaxy's edge. Other structures in distant voids, other civilizations that had learned to transcend normal space. Other forms of existence that the Council had never imagined. The galaxy is larger than you believed, the human concluded. Reality is stranger than your science comprehended. And we are no longer asking for your permission to exist in it. As the transmission ended, the human fleet settled into positions around every major Council world. Not occupying forces, but observers, waiting to see what choices would be made. Patient in ways that beings who had learned to exist outside normal time could afford to be dot in the Council chambers. Silence stretched like a wire under tension. The celebration of humanity's destruction had become a wake for everything the galaxy had thought it understood.